Hey everybody, Robert with RC Archery. Today's video, I'm going to be going over transitioning to a thumb release. This can mean that you're coming over from an index release or another handheld style release. I'm going to go over how to hold them, the anchoring position with them, resetting peep height to adjust for that release. I'm also going to go over how I'm executing with them and some other things along the way. All right, so before we get started with the video, I want to go over the thumb peg that you're going to see on my TrueBall Abyss Flex release during this video. This thumb peg here is one that I've recently designed and started using myself. It's a square model. It takes the dimensions that you would see on this stock peg and just squares them out. So the circular peg is 3/4 of an inch long, and it's also 1/2 inch in diameter. So what I've done with this is made this 1/2 by 1/2, 3/4 inch long. Fits in the hand really nice. The benefits that I see with the flat surfaces and of course with the edges from a square thumb knob here is that it allows you to be able to work off of increasing tension on the thumb button versus having to rely on friction. So like on the circular pegs, you have to rely on your thumb catching and kind of guiding across until it grabs and then it pulls through. On this one, you have a flat surface to lay your thumb against so it's comfortable and repeatable, and then you have the ability to set the square edge of this in any orientation that you would want, whether it be directly into the thumb crease, along the pad of the finger, back deeper in the hand, wherever it's going to be, and you have that corner to be able to work against to build tension. Flat surfaces on here work really well versus the circular or the spiral. And to me, it's really helped with my consistency on what I'm seeing left and right on target. So I'm not torquing my releases bad or really at all using this type of thumb button versus the others. All right, so getting started today, I'm gonna first go over how to hold a thumb button release in your hand. Now, this will work primarily across the board on all style of handheld releases, but you do have to be a little bit careful to adapt it on different models. So if you use a hinge, you're gonna of course do a little bit different setup with finger pressures than what I do on a button. And then on a resistance release, you can actually transfer this over directly to it. I'm gonna give you a couple different ways on how I'm gonna hold the button in my thumb. One that works best for me, and then also just another way. So you have options because what works best for me may not work best for you. So primarily what I talk to with a lot of people and the way that we look at it is, where do I place this in my hand? We don't want to get too deep with it. We want to stay within the 2 knuckles here. So I place it right in here, and that allows me to be able to make a hook with this release in the way that I'm holding it here. And if you see, the hook that I'm making here makes a flat position on my hand. And that's really important. You want that flat position because it's more repeatable shot to shot. If you have your hand balled up in a fist, you're working off of balling it into a fist the exact same way every time. And if you don't do that, then that's going to change your anchor point and also change what you're seeing through your peep sight, face pressure on the string, some other factors like that too. So having this flat hand is very important. Now you'll also see by having this flat hand, I curl my 3rd and 4th finger that's hanging off this release into the actual finger, palm part of my hand rather. And the reason I do this is because, again, it's repeatable and it's from shot to shot. I can set up the same way each time, but also it's going to help me later on when I explain to you how I'm working through my shot execution. So even though I am using a 2-finger release, these fingers stay generally in the same position or a little bit lower than if I was using a 3 or a 4-finger release. Now, the other byproduct of this is it makes your hand very square when it's flat, and then you have consistent placement on the thumb button. So whether you have it here, the way that I do, or whether you have it at the end of your thumb, however you're doing that, you're gonna have consistent placement shot to shot. All right, so now that we know how to hold the release, let's talk about anchor points. Now, I took this for granted for a long time, but since starting to work with my son on the way that we're shooting and transitioning to a handheld, I've noticed that the way that someone naturally wants to pick these up, especially if they've been shooting fingers, is to loop this on a string and hold it this way with the thumb facing up. So of course we want to face thumb down when we're using one of these releases, and the reason for that is because we're using the back of our hand as the anchor point on our face to steady up what we're seeing. So what we're going to do is use these 2 knuckles here, not the 2 knuckles on our base of our hand. And the reason we don't like to use these is, one, it's not going to allow us to get the hand far enough back on our face in order to get the best sight picture and the leverage over the bow. And then 2, having these 2 fingers here, we have direct contact with the face to keep this release and the string off to where it's not digging into the meat of our face here. So we're getting less string contact that way. And what we're gonna do is, you can pick a spot for you, whatever works that's natural and feels best for you. I will take my index knuckle here and I actually put it against the very bottom part of my jawbone, but I put it not dug deep down, I actually put it right on the edge of it. So it's just right under the bone, but still on the edge of it, not dug down into my face. For me, that's where I feel most comfortable to set up, and it gives me room to adjust the way that I need to for varying yardages from all the way from 20 to 100 yards. But that gives me a consistent spot that I anchor and pull my hand across to my face time after time. Now, the way that we're going to achieve that and the way that we're going to adjust with that is with our loop length on our bow. Now, the loop length on the bow has some different factors than just being what we attach our release to. Obviously, it makes things a little bit more forgiving. It helps take away a lot of the torque that we put into the string because we're using that loop, but we're using it to control the leverage that we have over the bow. Now, I won't go into depth on this video about it, but I do offer a video that shows you exactly how to get perfect draw length and perfect loop length for you. And I'll put a link for that down in the description of this video, so if it's something you want to check out, you can. And it's a pretty helpful tool. So what I use when I coach people, and it's just a guideline on how to get everything set up. But I'll use the Morin string trainer here that I have as a reference because I can adjust on this better than my bow. But you can see if I have a very short loop and my hand is really far forward towards my nose on my face, that puts this rear elbow pretty high. When you have that rear elbow high, then it does 2 things for you. One, it gives you a lot of leverage over the bow because your body has a lot of movement and available movement to pull that elbow down. And when you're doing that, you'll start noticing that you can pull the bow up on target and you can really manhandle the bow. The other byproduct is if you get your elbow too high, then you have a downward slope and you'll start raising this rear shoulder and you'll have problems with the bow wanting to aim down below the spot all the time and you constantly feeling like you have to lift it up. Now, in reverse to that, if you get the loop too long, or maybe if you're using a very short axle-to-axle bow and the string and the loop come way too far back on your face, you'll anchor and you'll come back here. When you do that, you can see that my elbow is actually below my hand on the level that I'm at because I'm too far back. When you do that, you lose leverage over the bow. You're losing the ability to be able to hold it up on target and the ability to be able to steady your sight picture. So you want to be able to find that perfect length to steady your sight picture the best and allow you a good solid anchor point. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is setting our peep height. Now, if you're coming from an index release to a handheld release, you're probably going to have to change the height of this. I do see a lot of variances between some people, especially with varying anchor points or maybe how they were using their index before. But really, even if you're coming from another style of handheld release or another model of handheld release, you're probably still going to have to adjust this a little bit, at least to find your comfortable anchor spot. Now, the reason that is some releases are made with different links on the neck of the release, and then also some of the hook points where they attach to your loop can be closer to the index or closer to the middle finger, and that's going to change the height that you need and the way that the release feels, even if your anchor point is the exact same from one release to a next. So I've done a video about this in the past. I'm going to link that here in this one up above. You can go back and view it and reference how to set peep height for multiple different games, whether it's indoors, outdoors, 3D, field, whatever that may be, and give you a better understanding of what to do. But the main principle behind what we're trying to accomplish here is finding a reference to a comfortable anchor position that you can repeat time after time with a peep height that matches. So just to give you an example and let you see what I do, I actually draw the bow back with my eyes closed and anchor to my face. So I'm going to bring the string to my face here to anchor versus digging it all the way into my face or pulling my head down or doing anything crazy. I want your head to stay upright. So when I anchor here and look through the peep, I should be able to see a perfect halo of the peep just a little bit bigger than the scope. And that's the way that I prefer to do it. That way I can match it up the exact same way every time and it allows for the least variance in your anchor point and impacts downrange. All right, so now the fun part of the video. Now this is the part of the video that most people are going to be looking for and waiting for, and it's how to execute with your thumb release. So how to shoot your bow with it, right? So there's a lot of different execution methods. One that involve curling the outer fingers, releasing the index, relaxing your palm of your hand, pulling, curling the thumb, lots of different ways. I've done a video on this in the past. I'm going to link it here with this one. It's an in-depth, up-close view of my hand, and I talk to you through the pluses and the minuses of each style of release. So it'll help you give an idea on what you want to try, or if you're currently using one of those methods and having trouble, maybe what you should switch to next. For this video, I'm going to focus on the way that I would shoot a release and also the way that I would not. So one way that leads to trouble later on down the road. And then I'm also going to talk to you about finger pressure within this release. So you can see here that if I have more tension on the outside of the release or less tension, it rocks the release. When you rock the release like that, it's changing pressures that we put on the loop, and that's directly affecting the back of the arrow. And when we do that, it's going to send the arrow down range, and you're going to see a lot of different variations if you're varying how you do your pressures here in your hand. So one of the reasons that I talked about at the first of the video of curling these outer fingers into the palm of my hand and keeping your hand flat is to keep the tension from varying. Now the other reason that I do this is because if you notice, if I don't hold on to the outside of this release or put the extra pressure on there and I put my thumb on here, I can rock this release back and forth with the thumb. You have to have something to be able to pull against that in order to fire a thumb release. So curling these outer fingers into the palm puts more pressure on this middle finger, and when I'm holding them there with full contraction, then I can do any method that I want on this thumb release to fire it. So for me, the way that I like to fire a release and what I'm working with on the thumb release right now is laying the thumb flat on the release like this and letting it curl around this notch a little bit, so the edge on this square peg, and then I pull my thumb and my middle fingers together. So I pull them in towards the middle of the palm of my hand. That's the feeling that I get from it. And when I do this, I focus on even tension between the two. So I don't want to get too much on the thumb or more on the outer fingers, because that's going to change that pressure on the release. The other reason I'm doing this is because it helps me not creep with my bow. So if I'm at full draw and I'm here and I put my thumb on there, if I relax my hand, then if I don't have enough pressure on the thumb and I relax my hand, you can see that this stretch band is starting to come forward. And the reason that I found that I have my most misses is I miss low because I'm relaxing on tension, or I miss high because I'm throwing the bow back up because I notice my pin is coming down. So to counteract that, and what works for me is, again, getting the full draw, evening the tensions here, getting some out on this middle finger, placing my thumb on there, and then just pulling my thumb and my finger together until the release breaks. Keeps me strong in my shot, and it makes it most consistent from time to time. Now, some methods that I would not do with a thumb release. One in particular is holding the thumb off the button and then just cramming it on there, so punching. We don't want to do that. That's going to develop some bad habits, some target anticipation, drive-by shooting, some things like that. And then another method that I'm not a biggest fan of long-term when you get to a certain level is solely putting the release here and putting your thumb on it and then just working on pulling back. Now, with my square thumb peg, you can do this and you actually have some really good benefits from it, but you have to be absolutely 100% perfect on the tension that you're placing on the button time after time. So it takes a lot of getting used to, and it takes a lot of time to work with this to get it most consistent to pull back. So meaning if you have more pressure on it, the shot may fire really quickly. If you have less pressure on it, it'd take a long time to fire, or it may not at all. So for me, that leads to some problems with anticipation and the way that my shot is going, but it also breaks it down on my shot timing. Our bodies have a natural window of when we need the shot to fire within. It's a few seconds long, so it's not like it's, all of a sudden it's there, bam, where you're drive-by shooting or punching. But it's a few second window there that if you miss that, then you're going to have less of a chance of hitting the middle of the target, or as close as you can to the middle, right? So for me, I don't particularly care for that method of pulling through, but I will say that when you're first transitioning to a thumb release, or a handheld, and maybe you're developing the right muscles and the right form and the right steadiness to really hold back on the back wall and maintain and increase the tension, then you can do this method with the thumb and it works the exact same as what you would with a tension style release. So, maybe if you want to run down that road or try that, you can. But again, you need to make sure you set the button up to where your thumb is around it, where it's wrapped around it on this edge of the square peg or a circle peg on the stock ones. Or you need to, a lot of the times what people will use is the pad of their thumb here. You can use it deep or you can use the pad, but you need to focus on consistent pressure on there, setting the thumb button heavy enough to where you can press into it without it firing and preload some tension on there. And as you're pulling back, work on focusing, pulling these outer fingers into your elbow. So what I do is when I do that, it actually pulls from the outside. It pulls the thumb into the bar a little bit more, or pulls the bar rather into the thumb a little bit more, and it does help fire that release. All right, everybody, if you would like to purchase one of these square thumb pegs that I have, or even these release attachments for the TrueBall Abyss Flex or Fulcrum Flex models, you can go to my website. I'm gonna put a link for that down in the description of this video. The thumb pegs are on pre-order. They will be available end of December, first part of January. I've actually have 2 batches already working through this, so I've had way more orders than I thought I would get. So if you've already ordered one of these, I appreciate it. If you haven't, try them out. For me, I see a huge benefit in my shot and what I was looking for with it. They'll work for multiple different release models, whether it's a TrueBall, a Carter, a Stan, a Scott, whatever it may be. All that I ask is in the notes section of the order if you will notate what release you're using. I get these releases and I pre-drill and tap the holes, but they're done by me, so that way I can adjust it over different release models and different brands of releases too. But I hope this video has helped any of you watching it today, and it will guide you on kind of a way to transition over to a thumb release. When used correctly, I feel like they have a lot of benefits. I think you can get away with less movement in the hand, less changes in anchor point. I feel like I can be more consistent with one, but it does take some time to get used to using one, get them set up properly with tension, placement in the hand, your loop length, and everything else with Peep Height. So give it a shot. Stay with it or any kind of handheld release, and I think you'll be surprised. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised for sure. But appreciate everybody watching today. Merry Christmas for anyone watching this video, and it's around the Christmas time when it's coming out right now. I hope you have some good time with your family and a relaxing holiday season. I will see you next time.